I want to introduce you to Larry Fink. Aptly named. Larry Fink. He is the head of something called BlackRock. If it doesn't sound real good to you, you're getting it. It is the world's largest asset manager. That's like referring to a bus driver as the world's greatest transportation engineer. It's a bus driver. He manages money, and he does manage an enormous amount of it. The biggest one there is, BlackRock, Larry Fink. And he was in the news this last month because he has a great idea. Here's his idea. President Trump, to whom he addresses all of this, President Trump, we Americans know that the roads and the bridges and the harbors in our country are in bad shape. We need to rebuild them, repair them, extend them. We need a massive infrastructure investment. I'm sure you've all heard about it. Trump was talking about it when he campaigned. He's been talking about it since he was elected. And Mr. Fink says, I recognize the man is being generous. Or to be more accurate, he's trying to have us think he's being generous. I know that the government has to do this. I know for our country's sake. Puts his hand over his heart, puts the flag on his head. For our country's sake, we have to invest in infrastructure, but I understand that the government can't afford it. It doesn't have enough money. No worries, he says. We can have it done by having a public-private partnership. Friends, when you hear that phrase, hold on to your wallet because someone is trying to get out of your pocket whatever is in there. Here's what Mr. Fink means. You don't have enough money, he says to the government. But we do. They're the big investment managers of wealthy people's money. An investment manager manages corporations and individuals who are wealthy. If you've never had an asset manager, it's because you are poor. I don't mean to be the bearer of the bad news, but not much I can do to help you here. So, Mr. Fink is going to help us all out. He's going to help the government rebuild the bridges, redo the roads, fix the harbors, all the things we need to keep our society going, literally. But because it's a partnership, of course, and because private money is going to be contributed by the private partners, there has to be a return on investment. An ROI for those of you who deal with high finance. In other words, they'll help, but there's got to be something in it for them. So they need to get a return on the portion of the infrastructure investment they're going to help us make. Which means the roads of the future will have lots of tolls. And the bridges will have lots of tolls. And the harbor will have lots of tolls, and you all will get to pay for them in order to give a return to the private partnership. Now let's go back and do that again. The biggest corporations and the wealthiest people in the world give their money to Larry Fink at BlackRock. And he says, I know the government doesn't have enough money. Stop, let's examine that. The reason the government doesn't have enough money is because large corporations and wealthy people don't pay taxes. That job is your responsibility. If you're wealthy, you get an accountant and a lawyer. You get an account in the Bahamas, one in Switzerland, one in Luxembourg, and one on the moon. And you arrange for your wealth to be held where it won't be taxed, to be held in a form where the government won't know. They're specialists in that. It gets exposed once a month. For what? For 50 years. Everybody knows. They help themselves, the corporations and the rich do, by evading their taxes. But now you've got to admire what Larry Fink is doing. Having starved the government of the taxes, they want to take the money that they didn't pay in taxes and partner with the government, using the money that the government didn't tax from them to now be a partner, and the government will have to pay them off for getting the money that they otherwise could have taxed from them. Folks, if we had more time, I would stop and you would have to listen to the national anthem. Because you have to take your hat off. This takes courage. I'm trying to find a neutral word. To come up with a plan like this and with a straight face, as if these folks are doing us a favor by offering to partner with us with the money that they didn't pay in taxes. Because if, of course, had they paid the taxes, the government would have the money and we wouldn't have an infrastructure problem in the first place, would we? They rip us off by not paying taxes, and now they want to rip us off with that money that they didn't pay by making us pay tolls so they can get a nice return on what they do with the taxes they didn't pay. Whoa! You want to know why capitalism has been successful? Because it pulls that stunt over and over again. This is just the latest installment. I wanted to talk to you about the American tax system. It's a topic I return to, but that many of you have asked me to talk about, and here in honor of tax season, I thought would be a good time. We have a very complicated tax system, actually more complicated than in most countries, because we have 3 levels of government that all tax us, and they all do it differently. The federal, the state, and what we call municipal or local. They're radically different, so bear with me, but if you stay with me, you'll understand this, and you'll have it in your head for the rest of your life, and it will help you understand what's going on. First, the federal. The basic way the federal government raises money is a tax on income. In other words, when you earn something, one way or another, the government comes in and takes a piece. That's how the federal government pays for itself. That is not the way state governments mostly do, and it is not the way local governments do. They do other things. We're going to do that in a few minutes. But the federal government has 2 kinds of income tax. It taxes the income of individuals, like you and me, and it taxes the income of corporations, the profits. That's called a corporate income tax versus an individual income tax. All right? The individual income tax now raises roughly half, it's not even half, it's a little less than half, of the total amount of money that the federal government raises, is the individual income tax. It is a progressive tax. Here's what that means. The higher your income, the higher the percentage of your income that you have to pay. If you earn very low, you pay nothing. If you earn a little bit more than that, you pay 10%, a little bit more than that, 15, 20. In other words, the higher your income, the bigger the percentage chunk the government takes. But less than half of the federal government comes off of a progressive income tax. The next big chunk, almost as big as the individual income tax that's progressive, is what's called the payroll tax. That's the money pulled out of your check every week if you get paid for Social Security and all of that. That is a different kind of tax. It is not progressive. What does that mean? The payroll tax, just as important as the individual income tax, is a flat rate. You pay exactly the same whether you earn $5,000 a year all the way up to $120,000 a year. Same percentage. It doesn't go up as your income does. Could it? Of course. That would just take a vote in the Congress, which is how you created the individual income tax. For those of you that are concerned, I've checked. Neither in the Bible, nor the Quran, nor any other holy book is it indicated what the tax rates should be. That is a human decision made by whoever the authorities are. So the payroll tax is a flat rate. But it isn't really flat because, and this is really wonderful, At about 100, I think it's right now 118,000, something very close to that. You pay the same rate whether you earn 5,000, 50,000, all the way up to 118. But on every dollar you earn above 118, your payroll tax wonderfully goes to zero. Do you understand? If you're very rich, you pay a lower percentage for payroll because every dollar you earn above 118 is completely exempt of the payroll tax. This is a tax organized to help rich people. You get to pay it, they don't have to. I mean, they pay on the first 118 like we all do. But since they earn a lot more than that, the bulk of what they earn, they don't have to pay the payroll. That's not progressive. That's what we call regressive. That's not good. Or rather, it's good for them. It's not good for you. That's the federal government. The rest of what the federal government gets is a corporate income tax. That is very, very low. That used to be high, but the companies have been very successful to lower it. So that brings in something on the order of 8 or 9% of the government's revenue comes from corporations. About 85% comes from you. So on behalf of the corporations and the rich, I want to say to all of you, thank you. Very, very kind of you to do this. Because, of course, if you didn't allow this, it would stop. Because you're the majority, and you are a large number of people, and the ones at the other end are a small number of people, and they are afraid of you. Which they have reason to be, unless, of course, you aren't going to do anything about this, in which case they got nothing to worry about. That's the federal government. Is there any other source of income? They're trivial. The federal government levies a tax on alcohol. It levies a tax on motor fuels. These are called excise taxes, but they don't bring in a significant amount of money. So let's now move to the states. Completely separate story. By states, I mean New York, California, Ohio. They also raise money because they do things that the federal government doesn't. For example, the federal government doesn't run universities. States do. So the states have to raise money. The federal government only maintains the federal roads, the interstates. But all the other roads are responsibility of the state, and on and on and on. So it's a whole complicated system in which the state has responsibilities that it has to raise money for that the federal government doesn't. The federal government, for example, has to pay for sending missiles to Syria. Ohio doesn't do that. Well, not yet. It's a federal. Military is a federal, by and large, a federal. So where do the states get the money? Well, they use a variety of things. Some states, not all, have an income tax. So that means, like in New York, you have a state income tax, which means if you're lucky enough to be in this room and live in New York, you get to pay an income tax to the federal government, and in addition, an income tax to the state government. In fact, if you live in New York City, you get this enjoyment 3 times. Because the city of New York also has an income tax, so you get to pay a federal and the state and the city income tax. You lucky people. Okay? But that's not the major way the state raises money, and it's not the way most states raise money. By the way, are there states that have no income tax? Yep. Any of you know some of them? Texas, biggest one is Texas. Oregon, yeah, I think New Hampshire is famous for not having it. Nevada, right. Yeah, well, if you have gambling casinos or that kind of thing, you can raise money. Alaska, because it gets money from the oil drillers and so forth. So what is it that the states mostly use? They mostly use something called a sales tax. That's that little addition when you buy a blouse or something and you see the prices, $40, but then you pay more at the cash register because they slap on it the sales tax that the local store has to collect and send to the government. That's where the money for most states come in. Yes, they have other things, dog licenses, car licenses and registration. They have that, and that's not nothing. But the big thing is a sales tax. So let me tell you about the sales tax, because you'll notice it has something in common with the payroll tax. A sales tax makes no effort to discriminate according to your ability to pay. A progressive income tax does that. The higher your pay, the bigger the percentage. The idea being those who have more should be asked to contribute more to the common fund that takes care of all of us. Not a complex idea. But a sales tax doesn't do that. A sales tax is X% on the price of the object. It doesn't distinguish whether you buy that object at TJ Maxx or Rockefeller walks into TJ Maxx. I'm granted he wouldn't do that, but if Rockefeller went in and bought the same shirt you did, Rockefeller would pay the same tax you did, and therefore as a percentage of his ability to pay, it's nothing. For you, you don't eat for a week. Okay? That's not an attempt. That's a very good tax for rich people. Why? Because for them, these are trivial amounts as a percentage of their income or their wealth. But even more, the richer you are, the bigger the portion of your income you don't spend. You save it. And if you save it, it's not subject to a sales tax. A sales tax only hits you when you spend money. And the poorer you are, the more likely you are to have to spend everything you get. So they get you. Now, if you're an American, they get you on your income tax. And with what's left, you can go and buy stuff, and they get you in the sales tax. So when you hear someone say, hey, it's not fair, I'm being double taxed, you now understand something. Everybody is double and triple and quadruple taxed. You hear someone say, I shouldn't be double taxed, that person is counting on you not understanding how the tax system works. As if you should have empathy. Oh, double, the poor guys are double. You're all double taxed, triple taxed. It's a joke, counting on your not understanding. Sales tax is the big thing, and that's a regressive tax. It discriminates against middle and low income people and is the best possible way for wealthy people to have a tax system because they escape much of it. Now let's go down to the third level. Local, municipal. First, to make sure, what does a local municipal government do? It does things the federal government and the state governments don't. For example, your public schools are handled as a local responsibility in this country. Other countries don't work like that, but in this country, it's local. So is the fire department. So is the police department. And so there's a whole bunch of local things. And how is the money raised to pay the teachers, build the schools, pay the cops and the fire and all the rest? They don't use an income tax. Most cities and towns don't. A few, like New York, do. New York is wonderful. You have the federal income tax, the state income tax, the city income tax. You have a state sales tax and a city. It's a wonderful New York City. It's a place where you, the mass of people, are taxed coming and going 50 different ways. Well, how do the locals do it? They don't use an income tax very much, very rare. They don't use sales tax, very rare. Some do, but very rare. It's a property tax. This is wonderful, folks. You're gonna love this one. Property tax. What does that mean? Every city and town has something called the tax assessor. If you go into your city hall, you'll see up on the list the mayor and the tax assessor. What the job of the tax assessor is to assess, to determine the value of all the property, all the taxable property in the town. The land, the buildings, the automobiles, the boats, things like that. In fact, I just mentioned most of them. They put a value on it. They actually send a person to your house, your business, who measure the square footage, and they come up with an estimate. And then you're required every year to pay a tax on the value of the property. You understand it? They figure out the value of the property, and they hit you with a tax each year on that value. If you own land, you've got to pay tax on the value of the land. If you own a building, you pay a tax on the value of the building, and so on. That's how local communities get the value of it. Very important that you understand it. In almost all cases, very few exceptions, it's a flat rate. There we go again. In no attempt to make ability to pay count. If your house is worth $10 million, you pay the same rate as if your house is worth $10,000. No attempt to do what only the federal income tax does. Progressive. None of it at the property level. But here comes the best part. What counts as property for a property tax? You might think it's all the property. And the answer is, not. No. You count the land, you count the buildings, your home, you count the store buildings, you count the cars. Everybody has to pay on that. But here's a kind of property that is not taxed in the United States by anybody. Stocks and bonds. Let me do that again so you're real clear with me. You sell a $100,000 house. On that house, in that town, you've had to pay property tax for as long as you own the house. If you sell the house, $100,000 house, and you get $100,000 cash and you buy $100,000 worth of General Motors stock or anything like it, your tax goes from whatever it was when you had the house to nada, zilch, nothing. So the property tax is wrongly named. It is a selective property tax. It's on some kinds of property, but not on others. And here's the important news. 1% of share owners own 2/3 of all the shares. So the 1% don't have to pay because most of their property is not in land and buildings, it's in stocks and bonds. If in the United States the owners of stocks and bonds were required to pay a property tax at the same rate that you pay on your car or your home or your empty lot, the amount of money coming to cities and states could transform your life. You'd have the best parks, the best schools imaginable. But we don't do that. We say to people, if you're rich enough to have stocks and bonds, you don't pay any property tax at all. You don't pay to the local town where you live, you don't pay to the state, and you don't pay to the federal government. Be careful because you're going to be assaulted with people who are upset about this and tell you stories. You do have to pay on the income your stocks and bonds earn you. If you earn dividends or interest, that's part of your income. But that's like having a house. If you rent out an apartment in your house, you have to pay income tax on the rent on top of the property tax you pay on the value of the home. But if you own stocks and bonds, you have to pay tax on the income they generate, but no tax on the value of the property. That is a stone-cold ripoff of which you are the victim. Because the government you count on hasn't got the revenue because those rich enough to have sizable stocks of bonds and stocks are not having to pay anything. And that's legal. That's the law. They don't have to pay. It's not an illegal act. That's the way the law has been written by them, of course. Therefore, you live in a tax system, this April 15th, that is as unjust as I could imagine, cleverly pieced together so that the little bit of progressivity of the federal individual income tax is completely swamped by the non-progressivity, the regressivity of the rest of the tax structure. Any discussion of tax reform that doesn't deal with these fundamental injustices isn't worthy of the name. Mr. Trump's tax reform never touched on any of this. And before I leave it, I have to just give a small punch in the nose to one of my favorite objects for being punched in the nose. Tax-exempt institutions. In the United States, we allow some institutions that own property and that earn income to be exempt from paying federal taxes, state taxes, and local taxes. My favorite for all time is located in New Haven, Connecticut. It's Yale University, where I went to school, and which, in a moment of mental lapse, gave me a PhD degree. In economics yet. So I'm going to turn what I learned at Yale on Yale. Seems kind of reasonable. So payback, you might call it. Yale is an institution that has, last time I looked, something on the order of 25 billion of assets. It sits on many acres. It's the biggest landholder in New Haven, Connecticut. 200 buildings filled with paintings and rare coins and a fantastic library. It's just a wonderful, rich institution. It looks like Cambridge and Oxford because in the 1930s, when the vast mass of New Haven residents were without work, and they included a large number of Italian-American craftsmen who knew how to do fantastic building, they tore down old buildings and built up new ones to look like old buildings of Oxford and Cambridge. So if you go to New Haven, it looks really wonderfully old. It isn't, but it looks like it. And if you don't know better, you think, oh, what a wonderful old building. Okay. So Yale, 200 buildings, biggest landowner, biggest employer, $25 billion in real estate, stocks, bonds, and it pays taxes not at all. It doesn't pay on its income the dividends and the interest it gets from billions of dollars. It pays no tax. It's exempt. It owns all that property, all the land in New Haven. What does it pay to New Haven on its educational land? Nothing. Nothing. There once was a commission in the 1980s, rare in New Haven history, to look into all of this. And the commission forced Yale to come and testify in front of it to look into the situation and pointed out to Yale, its lawyers sitting there, that one of the pieces of land, one of the biggest land holdings in New Haven that Yale had, was a golf course in the middle of New Haven. Beautiful golf course to which wealthy people came. And the commission had done its homework. They asked, and already knowing the answer, do you have any classes that meet at the golf course? No. Do the students use the golf course? No. How much does it cost to play at the golf course? A lot. What's the educational function of the golf course? The lawyer didn't even know what to say. How to watch a ball go into the pond? It's hard to... And so then the commission pointed out, you don't pay any taxes on that land. It's incredibly valuable in the middle of the city. Huge golf course. Yale's defense was, the way we raise money is we bring wealthy people to New Haven, really rich people. And what they enjoy is playing a little golf while they visit. So we need a golf course to entertain the rich people who give money to Yale, and therefore it's kind of an educational use, don't you think? The commission started to laugh at them, which upset them a great deal. That's not the way Yale likes to be treated. But when it went to court, to make a long story short, the judge, who by some strange thing was a Yale graduate, found in favor of the university, so it doesn't pay. For those of you that have thought about it, the richest universities in this country, Harvard, Yale, Princeton, they're all like this. They don't pay at all. So I want you to understand, when the fire department goes to Yale to help them deal with a fire, when the city health department cleans the air for the students and the faculty and the other administrators, all of that has to be paid for. And in New Haven, like everywhere else, the rest of the people have to pay the taxes to deliver public services to Yale University for free, because Yale doesn't pay. New Haven is the 7th poorest city in the United States. It has an enormous population of African American and Hispanic American people who have very little income. This should come as a major surprise to most of you, right? Those people pay extra to deliver free services to Yale because it doesn't pay the taxes that support public services delivered to Yale, like the fire department, the police department, educating the children of Yale personnel, and so on. This has to be called, because it's the only way to call it, Robin Hood in reverse. This is called stealing from the poor to make the rich even richer. That's also part of our tax system. Well, I had wanted to talk to you about the economics of the U.S.-China link. I will do that next month when we meet in May. My apologies, but It's your fault as well as mine. I respond to what I see in your faces, so I try to go. But let me close with taking you back to what I said before. As it percolates into the consciousness of the American people that what was promised to them cannot and will not be delivered, not 100%, but most of it will get lost in the shuffle. Just to give you one tiny example. Today it was announced, because he had to. Today Mr. Trump announced that what he had said over and over again running for president, that when he was elected he would designate that China manipulates its currency in order to do advantage over the United States. He decided today he's not naming China as a currency manipulator, ... Just gone. Just gone. He can't do it. You'll learn next month why the United States depends on the People's Republic of China in 10 different ways that make cutting and doing the things he threatens absolutely out of the question. Not going to happen. And the question really is, as it becomes clear he can't or won't deliver on the grandiose promises he made, at that point the question will be, A, what did the mass of people do, particularly those who put their confidence in him? And number two, what will he do as his ability to govern, which is already shaky, becomes impossible? What will he be tempted to do to hold on to a situation that's dissolving?